Coming down in 3, 2, and 1. Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. If you have joined us live, let's see if we can speak English today. Good morning again. If you have joined us live on our StreamYard link for our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with Kyle Nabors, who of course is our group sports editor at Shaw Media, and Sean Hammond, our Chicago Bears Insider beat reporter. We join you every Friday morning at 9:30, and if you want to participate in the podcast, all you have to do is go to one of our Twitter handles. You can join Kyle at Kyle Nabors, or pick up on Sean at Sean_Hammond. Mine is at Hub_Arkush. And you can get to this broadcast every Friday morning at 9:30 Chicago time. You can also join us via YouTube, or if you haven't gone to YouTube or Twitter, you can get certainly in by downloading the iTunes app on your phone, and of course, getting a subscription to our podcast that way, or just go to ShawLocal.com. If you are just listening as a podcast, that's great too. But the nice thing about joining us live each Friday morning is that we get to take your questions and comments and make sure we get to talk about what's on your minds. And guys, I think what's on everybody's mind relative to the NFL right now, other than obviously the playoff chase and all the competition and parity and everything else, is the significant COVID outbreak during this past week around the National Football League. Some teams hit much harder than others, of course. But as we recorded, there was still great debate as to whether they should even attempt to play the Browns-Raiders game, which is on Saturday this week, with 21 Browns players on the COVID list. Washington has got, I think it was 20 Browns and 21 Washington players. A significant outbreak in Chicago this week. The Rams have a significant outbreak. Again, I've been checking this morning, unless I missed something. As we recorded, no games have been postponed. But I think the question of the hour, Sean, is why not? Because at this point in the season, especially with these teams with playoff hopes and playoff chase on the line, to ask them to play this way just seems kind of unreasonable.
Yeah, it is a little bit unreasonable. When you got 20 guys out and you're in the playoff hunt, I mean, nobody wants to, you want to see these teams at their best and with their best players. And that's why people pay to go to the games. That's why we tune in. So it's certainly a situation worth watching here. I don't expect the NFL to change anything. I mean, we saw what went down last year with so many opportunities. The most they did was push a game back maybe a day or two. Who knows if they're actually thinking that? I'm sure it's a lot more complicated now that they have fans in the seats and all the stuff that comes with that in terms of contingency plans. So it wouldn't surprise me if the NFL makes them play as they are with whoever they have available, which is kind of a bummer for the fans.
Kyle, it's interesting. Sean's right. There was, as I recall, one game, I want to say it was Steelers-Titans, that got pushed back a couple weeks to a bye week because they both had the same bye week and they were able to do it. But yeah, for the most part, it was delaying a few days here, a few days there. And so getting together this offseason, the NFLPA and the owners negotiated the current COVID protocols, and they announced at the time that there would be no postponements this year, that they had protocols in place that they thought were going to work. Now, let's not forget, though, this summer when they were negotiating this, we thought the worst was behind us and hadn't seen the Delta variant or the Omicron variant coming, or these continued surges. And the league made a point of saying that they would not cancel games, and they even negotiated and agreed on a rule where if a team could not play, they would forfeit the game. And that, I suppose, would be up to the team. But then the other part that they put in, and I still don't believe the Players Association agreed to this, is that if a team did forfeit, the other team players would not get paid for that game. And the way players' salaries are paid is they used to be paid 1/17th. Now they're paid 1/34th, so that they get paid, spread out more over the course of the season. But at the end of the day, what they're still saying is that if a game is forfeited, the other team that doesn't have the COVID outbreak forfeits 1/17th of their pay, almost 5%, well, more than 5%. And that is obviously ridiculous. So now, with this Browns-Raiders game, Baker Mayfield has been outspoken about how can the league not care about our health, postpone the game. Let's focus on our health first. And yet, you got Raiders players saying, well, we're not going to forfeit a paycheck just because you guys got sick. And so it's stunning to me that the Players Association agreed to this. And guess who is not only the captain of the Cleveland Browns, but the president of the NFL Players Association. It's their center, J.C. Tretter. And so it's really created I don't even want to call it interesting. I just think an unfortunate situation where we're not talking about what matters, which is keeping these guys healthy.
No, we're not talking about that because, as Sean said, it kind of hit the nail on the head. It comes down to revenue. One, I mean, for the players, yeah, I mean, they don't want to risk losing a paycheck. But two, the other part is getting, if you move a game to Monday or Tuesday, that's going to take a hit to the fans in the stands and everything that comes along with that. You move a game, all the vendors, let's say, those people aren't working 7 or 5 days a week. You move a game to Sunday to Monday, all of a sudden, maybe you lose some of those vendors. Everything that goes into a game day experience. You have all the, the first responders that are, contracted to be there for security, to direct traffic. You change all that. All that stuff kind of goes into the game day experience when you have fans. Now, when you were changing games last year, moving games back a couple of days, either had no fans in the stands or very limited fans in the stands. So this wasn't as much of it as a consideration as it is this year.
Well, Kyle, those are great points, and they're very real. And my attitude towards that is tough. I mean,
I understand that attitude.
Yeah, it is stunning to me, and I would be all over the owners on this one and say, how big a jerks can you be that your concern here is when we're battling a pandemic is saving money and taking it away from the players, not out of your own pocket. But the Players Association agreed to this. That's the part I can't get my arms around. I don't know what they were thinking, and now I just, we're here in Chicago and you're not hearing as much about the Bears because they're not in the playoff chase. Nobody seems to care. It's kind of been quiet. And yet on one day, they had all three of their coordinators, offensive coordinator Bill Lazor, defensive coordinator Sean Desai, special teams coordinator Chris Tabor, and 6 more players with 5 already on the list test positive. I mean, when you talk about, we follow this pandemic in terms of positivity rates and how states are doing. And when you hear that a state's positivity rate, the number of people tested who turn up positive has turned out to be, 5, 6, 7%, you really get concerned. Illinois, where the Bears are based, had been under 3 forever. It's up now close to 6%. But if you look at the numbers with these Bears tests on one day, that is a 11, 12% positivity rate, and it's growing fast. And clearly our focus is in the wrong place here, Sean, as far as what, needs to be done and taken care of. And I'm not pretending to have any great answers. I mean, the world hasn't figured it out yet. The country hasn't figured it out yet. And the NFL had done a better job than most. But if anything else, this should serve as warning to people how dangerous this is and how far away we are from solving any of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the tweet that the NFLPA put out. It had a comment from J.C. Tretter and just about the way that they're testing for vaccinated players, how they're being tested once a week. If you come in and get tested on Monday, that allows six days then at that point in which somebody can contract COVID and, it's spreading in your building among vaccinated players without you ever knowing because you don't test them until Monday. And then it seems to be that maybe that's part of the reason why we're seeing so many guys testing early this week, not just in Chicago, but across the league. And now we're seeing the league sort of take some action. And the Bears we're doing our interviews over Zoom today. The Bears are doing their meetings over Zoom, and it's really affecting the league, and it's affecting the way that, they've changed some of their rules for the players in terms of, how they can get back into the field and whether they can have visitors on the road and things like that. So this is going to be evolving, and it's going to keep evolving. And, we just hope that they can get through these last 4 weeks here and into the playoffs.
I'm going to look at this from a selfish standpoint too, because the product in the NFL has been pretty mediocre to begin with this season across the board. It has not been very good football most of the year, and it's only going to get worse when you're talking about this many players out. As a selfish standpoint, I want to watch good football, particularly late in the year. I don't want to see teams that are already banged up with injuries now competing with 10 to 12 guys out with, COVID illnesses or in quarantine. It just drags the level of football down even more.
Yeah, but Kyle, I think you may have just taken us in a different direction, which is fine. That's what's fun about doing these, though. I didn't know that. I don't know that I agree. You say the product hasn't been very good. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know that I agree either.
I think it's been a bad year for the NFL. Coming off a couple of really good years, I think it's been a lot of mediocre football this year.
I think you're mixing parity with mediocre. That's what I think.
yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's an element of taste here, as far as because we always get into the argument, the basic argument of do you need these video game all offense shows, or do you like good defense? Do you like running the football? Blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've seen the game last night was one of the best games I've seen.
No, yeah,
yeah, a few weeks, and again, well, if you're listening to the podcast, you have an idea of what we're talking about. We record on Friday mornings at 9:30. Chiefs Chargers game I thought was special, not the whole game, but certainly in the and most of the game, the second half. I thought the Monday nighter between the Patriots and the Bills was a treat, even though it was Belichick only running the ball. And I can go over. There's been a lot of, I think, enjoyable games. They're not. I think part of your problem is, again, we're based in Chicago, and no, we haven't seen a lot of great games locally. But I hadn't heard a lot of. Again, it's obviously a matter of taste. There's no right or wrong here. But I hadn't heard that from a lot of people, Kyle. And normally there is a lot of talk about that when people are generally upset with it. So that just interested me when you went there.
It's interesting that you guys haven't heard that. I feel like that's all the talk I've heard. I guess we're just running in different circles here in terms of maybe the media that we take in. I don't know. It's been, and listen, there's been gems. I mean, last night was a fantastic game. Yeah, and that New England game was fun. But overall, I think it's been a lackluster year. And a lot of that has to do with injuries. I mean, there's been a lot of notable injuries, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, particularly at the running back position, that to me has kind of hampered the product.
Yeah, running backs have taken a beating. There's no question about that. And then, of course, even some of these games that have been sloppy for a while. I mean, another one that I enjoyed was seeing the Vikings go up 29-0 and then see the Steelers come storming all the way back. Now there was a lot of slop in that game. I mean, it was fun, to see it come down to that at the end. So I guess that's a different conversation for a different time.
Well,
I know we have.
Here's a good pivot for you.
Yeah.
Talking about mediocre football, how fun was the first half of Sunday Night Football between the Bears and the Packers, though? There was finally a week where I was sitting there watching a Bears game where I didn't want to bang my head against the wall, at least for a half.
Yeah, Sean and I were sitting next to each other in the press box at Lambeau, and I believe my tweet was, "This may not be art, but it's certainly entertaining," and it really was. And some of that's the element of surprise, I think, too, because it's not that I didn't think there was any chance the Bears could compete, but I didn't see it coming that way, Sean.
No, I don't think anybody was expecting the type of offensive output they put together in that first half, and yeah, that was fun. I mean, it's good to see them do something like that, after we've seen these games. The first half against the Ravens comes to mind where they couldn't do anything on offense. And it made for a fun first half. And I think, unfortunately, I think everybody kind of had the feeling that it was going to end the way that it did. You have that when you're a Bears fan, I think you have that thought in the back of your mind every time you play the Packers, like, okay, this is a good start, but how are we going to finish this game off against Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I love Sean's comment there, Kyle, about everybody kind of expected it couldn't last. I believe another one of my tweets at halftime was, "Hey, America, aren't you glad they didn't?" I think I started out by saying, "I'm sure I'll regret this before it's over, but aren't you glad they didn't flex this one out of prime time?" And then my favorite, though, was I'm sitting there watching, and finally, late in the third quarter, I'm thinking, hey, guys, we didn't expect to see Tevin Jenkins this way, but he's been out there for 2 quarters. You don't really notice. That's not bad. And it was two plays later, he gets a holding, a strip sack, and a fumble lost on the same play. But it was that kind of game for the Chicago Bears. So.
Absolutely. I think, that's a good time to bring in some questions here that are starting to build up in the chat. I'm going to throw this one up about the run game from Michael Jones first.
Michael says, what happened to the run game in the second half of the Packers game? I think Montgomery ran the ball once. Why put it on Fields to throw so many times with an offensive line that struggled with pass protection? First of all, I don't know, Michael, that I agree the offensive line struggled with pass protection. That started to break down as the game got away from them in the second half. I thought the line played pretty well in the first half, and then a lot of those struggles came where Jenkins was. They were trying to help him out a little bit. Some of that happens, as Matt Nagy pointed out, on the 32 pass attempts. They tried to help not just Jenkins, but they helped the offensive line 16 times with chips or smashes, he called them. And when you do that, you take away receivers. You've got a rookie quarterback who's holding the ball way too long. So these comments on the Bears pass protection, I think sometimes don't take the whole thing into consideration. But that said, the game started to get away from him. And Nagy commented specifically that he was disappointed, Sean, that he only got one carry in the second half. But look at how that third quarter went, and 1 minute you're competing and the next minute you're down by 2 touchdowns. And that happens, with a lot. I'm not excusing it. I mean, you'd like to see the Bears play 60 minutes and have a balanced offense. I think in general, Sean, we're overrating what the offense did. A lot of that was the Packers' horrible special teams. Not just the one touchdown, the 97-yard punt return from Jakeem Grant, but you get the 2 big chunk plays from Grant and Bird. They count. I'm not saying they don't, but when that's 2 out of 60 plays, you look at the other 58. The offense struggled again, and it was the running game that was working early. And then when they lost that in the second half, they were back to where they've been for the most part, even though they ended with 30 points on the board.
The Grant receiving touchdown and the Bird touchdown, both those plays happened, and those are sort of lightning in the bottle plays. They weren't long throws. They weren't those guys just showed their speed. And I was sitting there thinking, man, it would be nice if they could spread a couple of those plays out and not have them in the same game. You're looking for those moments like that from those guys all season long. And while it's great to have multiple of them in one game, it'd be nice if they could do that, here and there throughout the season. I generally agree, Hub, with what you're saying. I mean, the way the game played out there in that second half, once they fell behind, I mean, they really didn't get a chance to establish the run because the second play from scrimmage, Justin Fields gets strip sacked, and then all of a sudden they're down by 8 points or whatever.
Kyle, it leads to a very unpopular conversation, I'm afraid, but I think it's one we have to have, and it's what the next 4 weeks are going to be about. The reality is that forgetting his athletic ability and the excitement and the promise and everything, all of which I think is still there, right now Justin Fields is not a good quarterback. You knew that when you started a rookie week. One of the things I want to talk about is where this whole thing went wrong. So we'll come back to this. He took over in the second quarter, week 2, started week 3 against the Lions that they didn't want. And then actually I've got this wrong. Started week 3 against the Browns. Then, they come back and they beat the Lions, mainly with defense and special teams. And then they announce he's going to be the starter the rest of the year. So I think somewhere in there is where you start to evaluate him. And I don't know that Justin Fields is much better now than he was week 4 in that start against the Lions. And I'm not concerned because I don't think he should have been starting all year long. And I know it takes a while. But when you see the same mistakes, the same things, I mean, again, Sean and I are sitting next to each other in the press box, and when he cocked his arm to throw that pick 6, I'm going, no, don't do that, and yet he's not seeing this stuff, and so it is something that we're gonna have to watch very closely the next 4 weeks, because at some point you have to stop saying, I think he's going to be great just because I know he can be. And you have to realize how many of these rookie quarterbacks we think are going to be great because we know they can be, and it never happens.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes,
well, let's start with that interception. There's no way around it. That was just a terrible decision. You could see it developing. It's the type of play you expect from rookie quarterbacks. It's unfortunate. I do think he's progressed some. He's not seen the field well enough yet. That's definitely clear. But we've talked a lot about his indecisiveness when deciding when to run the ball and also keeping his eyes downfield when he's doing that. He does seem to be progressing in that facet, which is a promising sign. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I mean, I don't think we saw the type of indecision against the Packers that we had maybe earlier in the season. And, I just think it needs more time. It's far too early to have some sort of verdict. I get what you're saying, Hub. Like at some point we have to flip that switch. But I'm going to let his rookie season play out and see what it's going to be a long off season. We'll have to see what shakes out with the coaching staff and all that. But what does this look like next year as they're getting into the start of the regular season?
Yeah, hey guys, and you don't flip that switch, on a rookie quarterback. I'm not suggesting that at all. And I thought the one actual change in the Green Bay game was the decisions he made to run the football. And it wasn't just that he was protecting himself, although that was a part of it. He acknowledged that to us when we talked to him yesterday. We visited with him Thursday. I asked him the question specifically. But his decisions as to when he went and then when he decided to slide and how much more productive he was in the run, that was better against the Packers. And that was a good sign. But that's not what you're hoping for from Justin Fields. I mean, that's the bonus part. Okay. It's about reading defenses, reading coverages, and knowing how to run an NFL offense. And it is way too early. But the reason that you start a rookie when you do as early as they did is the hopes that by 10 games later, you're starting to see significant improvement, consistent improvement. And you are not seeing that. You saw it in the second half against Pittsburgh. This was the first time this week, Sean, if you go back to our visit with Matt on Monday, where he actually detailed, not because he wanted to, but he kept getting asked, 3 or 4 plays on which he made terrible decisions. I mean, you go to the first score where they settle for 3 in the red zone instead of getting the touchdown, and he makes a poor throw at Cole Kmet, who's covered when Allen Robinson is open in the back of the end zone. And both, Nagy and Justin acknowledged, that's another one he should have seen. There was a couple more. I got to go back and look at my notes, where these are being pointed out now as consistent misses, and it's early. You give him time. Love the kid. Still think he's going to be good. But I talked to we make our calls every day and work our sources around. I was talking to a pretty successful head coach yesterday who said, I'm not seeing it. And he said, no, I'm not studying tape of the kid every week. He said, but, they've been in prime time enough. I've watched them a little bit. And he said, and I loved him, but I'm not seeing it after 10 games. And that's kind of what got me thinking about this. So, and he also immediately said, now, I'd still love to have him and work with him. So, we're just I'm trying to have a real, here's the problem, guys. Okay. A lot of people are going to get fired, not just coaches and players. And we talk about how awful this offense is, and it may be just a bad offense, and Matt Nagy may not be a great offensive coach, but it would have been better with a quarterback who knew what he was doing. How much better it's not the question anymore, because these guys are going to get fired, so it doesn't really matter. But you can't ignore that if you're going to analyze, how it got this way and all of how disappointed we all are and how bad this offense is.
Sean?
Kyle, I'm looking at you.
See, guys, if you want to do this for 40 some years, you got to get out on a limb and you got to talk about this stuff.
I mean, you're fine.
No, that was great, Hub.
I disagree. I don't want to say strongly. You are right on many facets. I don't think there's a lot of cause for concern yet. I expect it to come to Justin Fields. He's making enough special throws that, that's what kind of frustrating though, right? Like, he's making the special throws. You want him to make the ones that are pretty apparent though. Like there are times he's missing reads that should be big chunk plays. I think that's going to come. Hub, you wrote a good column this week that everyone can find at shallowlocal.com about how important these next 4 games are. This is a stretch where they're going to face some defenses that are going to give points up. The Vikings want you to score on them. There's no doubt about it. Depending on what the Bears have available on Monday night, they should be able to put a lot of points on the board in this game.
Yeah, and guys, we know what happens is people take the soundbite they like, and so whatever, I've learned to live with that. I don't think there's cause for concern yet either. I'm trying to be as clear as I can about that. It's too early in this, but what I do think is important is that people at least be fair and objective when they analyze the rest of the football team, the offensive line, the receivers, the coaches, and this is a big part of it. And I think even more than that, this is part of the organizational dysfunction as to how this happened in the first place, because that's the next major decision that's going to be made. Does Ryan Pace stay or go? Does Matt Nagy stay or go? If they do, who's going to replace them? Who's going to make those decisions? Because I reported it, I forget how long ago it was now. It was, I guess, Thanksgiving week. So what was that, a month ago? That there was interference from non-football people in the decision as to when Justin Fields should be the starting quarterback. And what that did is have a trickle-down effect. I don't believe in trickle-down economics. It's been proven for 50 years it doesn't work, but in football, it absolutely does work. If the quarterback can't get the job done, then everybody else around him is going to struggle. And so I just think it's important to have in the public dialogue these conversations that are based on everything that goes into these outcomes, Sean.
Yeah, and Justin Fields is never going to succeed if he doesn't have the right pieces around him. And those are the conversations that should be going on right now at Hallis Hall. Is Ryan Pace the right guy to get those pieces around him? And it's a work in progress. Obviously, you'd like to have more weapons on that offense. You'd like to see him get Allen Robinson more involved, not just on that wide open, not just on that play in the end zone, but throughout the game. There's all sorts of considerations to take in here when you're looking at his receivers and the offensive line. And, we did get to see Tevin Jenkins a little bit. It wasn't his, or I should say not a little bit. We saw him most of the game. Not the first impression he wanted to make, but I wouldn't worry a whole lot about that at this point. I mean, he's coming in on short notice. He hasn't played a football game in a year. And, you get thrown into that situation. And, yeah, he had a couple of penalties. I'm going to pump the brakes on that and just see what shakes out, especially if he's playing this week. If Jason Peters isn't back, how does he look after a week of practice?
Yeah, Kyle, I know we want to get to the questions, but maybe just to put a wrap on this, unless some of the questions come in and we talk more about it, I think part of Sean's point, and by the way, you're right, Sean, we have to wait until we see the list, but Jason Peters isn't playing this week.
I wouldn't expect it, no.
Yeah, once they told us it was a high ankle sprain on a 340-pounder, and you saw how much trouble he had getting off the field, I don't know if we'll see Jason Peters again this season, and maybe not again after that, which would be a shame because he did step in and play well, but he's going to be 40 years old. But I think the last part of that conversation, and then, Kyle, pick the question you want to throw up there, is the other concern that you always have with this as far as the coaches going forward, whether it is new coaches for Justin Fields, whether it is these coaches, is because of the way the plan changed and what happened here, has damage been done. And I don't think any of it's irreversible if it is. But when you take the beating that this kid has taken, and when you hear week in and week out as a 22-year-old new to the NFL that you have the worst offense in the NFL, historically bad, and when you are making some of the same mistakes repeatedly, again, that's how these kids fail. That's why you don't do what the Bears did here. And I am not predicting it. Everything I see tells me I think the Bears may have finally found their quarterback. I think we're just going to have to be a little more patient than we had hoped to have to be. But these are the very real concerns as you make these organizational changing decisions that have to be made right now.
Before we head over and talk offensive line, guys, I see a couple questions in the chat about the offensive line I want to get to. But since we're talking quarterbacks here and level of concern, I want to play a little game. I want to do for each of you. I'm going to throw out the three rookie quarterbacks that have been playing so far this year. For the most part, Trey Lance, has played a little bit, but not consistently. And talk about our level of concern. We'll start with Justin Field. If we did a 1 to 10 after seeing him so far, where would your level of concern be? I'd be like a 2.
And 10 being the most concerned.
Yeah, like oh no, this might be a dumpster fire. 10 would be that, and 1 would be, I think he'll be all right. I'm going with like a 2, maybe a 3 on Justin Fields.
Yeah, I would say about a 3. I'm not too concerned yet. We don't know what this is going to look like next year. You get the right coaches in there, who knows what he is capable of. And so I think we just got to see. We have to see more from him.
I was waffling between a 2.5 and a 3.5, so I guess that gets me to 3 too. There's one thing, Sean, when we see him that I can never get my arms around is he's very bright, he's very well spoken, and he's very mature. But sometimes I almost get the impression a little dismissive, or a little more dismissive than a 22-year-old should be. And to me, the mental part is by far the most important part with these guys. So I was going to say 2, and I'm going to take it to 3 just because I am trying to get to know and understand him a little bit better. And that's kind of getting deep in the weeds as far as the physical part and his play so far and what we've seen. I was even going to say 2, but I'd say probably a 3.
How about the other 2 guys? I'll go first here. Zach Wilson, I have it about an 8 right now, and Trevor Lawrence is probably about a 5 or a 6.
Well, Sean, I'll jump in because I had Zach Wilson as a 10 the day he was drafted. Never saw it, and I
Yeah.
still don't see it. I mean, now 10 is unfair. He's had the same thing done to him that I don't think any of these kids, I don't care who they are, they should not be playing as first day rookies. And especially, in a situation like that in New York with that team with a brand new head coach who's a defensive whiz. And I think Bob Saleh's got a chance to be a pretty good head coach. But yeah, I mean, for me, Zach Wilson is an 8 or a 9.
He looks lost out there.
Yeah, I would put Zach Wilson in the. I'd give him an 8. I'll say, but I'm thinking about going to 9. It's right there. I'm not too worried about Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that's just that situation is worse than what Justin Fields is going through with the Bears.
Yeah,
I don't know what you could expect of him right now.
No, yeah, I'm a little surprised by your 5 or 6 on that one, Kyle. To me, Trevor Lawrence is this, whatever Justin is, Trevor Lawrence is, and maybe he should even be a half a point lower because, I mean, guys, if you don't like Matt Nagy, you don't like Matt Nagy. I'm not going to change anybody's mind. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I don't know how I feel about him as a coach, but I can tell you that Justin Fields has been in a good situation in which he's been nurtured, protected, and had some decent coaching. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, that shouldn't be done to anybody. I wouldn't do that to Satan. I mean, and I think Satan's the guy who did it. That's another one. The second they hired Urban Meyer, I said, what the hell's the matter with you people? And so, some of this stuff is so predictable, but yeah, I'm not in the least. As a matter of fact, Trevor Lawrence was the guy who stood up last week, and I think maybe got Urban Meyer fired. Because it was when he stood up and said, hey, James Robinson's got to be the starting running back. And then, 4 days later, the owner steps in and says, you know what, you're right. Get this guy out of here. So I give Trevor Lawrence a lot of props for that.
Yeah, having an aging Carlos Hyde out there toting the rock for you when you have James Robinson on the roster doesn't make a lot of sense. But the only reason I have a Trevor Lawrence is that high is we talk about how a situation like that can affect a quarterback, and that was a completely toxic situation that I do worry that had effect on Trevor Lawrence. And part of the reason I worried that it had an effect is you actually saw him regress this season. You look at the beginning of the year, he's playing worse now than he was then, and I don't think that's because of a lack of talent. I think that's because of the situation he was put in. Hopefully that quickly rectified itself, but I do worry that it's going to have a long-term effect. They need to make a good hire. He could be in trouble.
Guys, in many respects, I don't know if this story got told enough, but Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields have been competing for 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B since high school. That's how far back it goes. And the only thing that really ever separated the two of them was all that big game championship experience that Trevor Lawrence got. Well, Justin Fields did. Well, and Justin Fields had to transfer to get to a place where he could have his own program. But when you look at the high pressure, success that Trevor Lawrence had, and granted, he had better players around him than everybody else. I understand. Well, not as much, so much in the SEC or the AC. Well, I guess the ACC. Yeah. I don't worry about that. Really, for the same reasons as Justin. I think these are two pretty grown-up young men, and the fact that he stood up to it the way he did. You're right, Kyle. I mean, the concern has to be there. I'm the one who brought it up. When you do this to these kids, you can create damage. But I think they're both, special enough that they're going to be okay.
All right. Well, let's get back to some Bears talk here. We got questions on the offensive line here as my mouse dies. So I can't scroll back up. Here we go. Let's see. We're going to go with CJ Williams. CJ first said good morning, so thank you. Good morning, CJ.
CJ wants to know if Fetty can return soon. Is there any scenario where they inserted Fetty at guard and Whitehair back to center? I don't know why they would do that. Everybody's pretty happy with Sam Mustipher, CJ. I don't think he's ever going to be an all-pro, but he's developed as one of the leaders on that line. He does do a nice job making all the line calls. They say he's like a coach on the field. He's a little, physically not handicapped, but challenged, shall we say. He's had to grow himself into a 315 pounder. But I don't know why you'd want to do that. I guess, Sean, maybe I'm missing something there.
Well, I don't know, Kyle, have you seen, I feel like I've seen a lot of people on social media and on the internet throwing some hate at Sam Mustipher. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, there's definitely an undercurrent among some corners of Bears fans.
There's a segment that isn't a big fan of Mustafa.
I think that's unfair. Mustafa is, he's not ever going to light the world on fire. He's solid. I don't think you need to mess with the interior of your offensive line. You're good there. What the next few weeks are about trying to figure out what you have at your tackle position. One with Tevin Jenkins and the other obviously with Larry Borum. Now we don't know if Larry Borum's even going to be available because he's in COVID protocols. But that has a lot to do with what this offensive line is going to look like on Monday night.
And I think that's the if Ifedi can get back this week, which we don't know for sure, but he's opened the practice window. Larry Borum on the COVID list is the big concern. You're going to need Ifedi and Jenkins at those tackle spots if Borum can't play.
Yeah, I expect that Ifedi, they opened that window because Borum went on the COVID list. Ifedi had COVID earlier in the year, so I guess, or at least he was on the list. I don't know. We never know if they actually test positive or they're close contacts. So I think that's as much, to try and have as many options for Monday night as possible, because realistically, if the three of them are healthy, Ifedi's a free agent at the end of the year. Borum and Jenkins are the future. You're not going to play Ifedi ahead of one of them. And as far, guys, how I feel about a lot of the stuff on social media. I would ask if any of the Mustafa haters have any football background whatsoever, and I think I know the answer. But to the point,
they're in our chat right now. Pretty much everyone's responding that Mustafa needs to go, which I pretty strongly disagree. He's been solid. I mean, he had a couple games early in the year where he struggled, but since then he's been fine.
He struggled a couple weeks ago. I mean, he's not the best center ever, But I mean, everybody who has ever coached or evaluated Cody Whitehair has said his best position is guard. They're getting overall pretty good interior line play when they're able to run the offense. This gets back to this whole trickle-down thing I'm talking about, which is if they could ever run the game plan they want to, if they could ever not have to throw away the plan after the first 15 or 20 scripted plays, and I don't think they're even getting through the first 15 or 20 scripted plays anymore, then you'd have a better idea of what this is all about. But, most importantly is some of my, quote, offensive line sources, offensive line coaches that I talk to, like Mustafa. I mean, he is never going to be a dominant center, but he's not playing badly. I don't understand where this comes from. I think, you see something where a guy comes free in a game and everybody says, oh, look where he came from. Mustafa blew the block. Half the time that's not even true. And he did. Kenny Clark will eat him up. Kenny Clark eats up every center in the NFL, I just don't get where that comes from.
And look, he's 25 years old. He has basically a year of NFL experience. He's going to keep getting better too.
I mean, I this is weird to me. Like I agree, I very much agree with you guys here, and disagree with the chat. I think they're gonna re-sign James Daniels or make every attempt to. I think the interior of their offensive line is pretty set. I mean, the thing we need to figure out over the next few weeks is what are they going to do at the offensive tackle position? How confident do they feel in Larry Borum and Tevin Jenkins going into next year, or do they need to address that position?
Well, and let's not forget, guys, I mean, Alex Bars became the Swiss Army knife, and they've been using him as a sixth offensive lineman and an oversized tight end and in the big boy packages. But when needed, he stepped in and played very well at guard and center last year, and he is big enough and talented enough that I mean, he could have a future at center, if not guard or tackle. So I think they feel good about the interior of the offensive line. Getting James Daniels re-signed is key. Don't know what that market is going to be because he has not become the player that I think you hoped. And again, he should be at center. I mean, this is the guy who, out of all the whole conversation, that's what he was drafted to be and was considered one of the best center draft prospects that had come out in years when they drafted out of Iowa. So the point is they've got plenty on the interior of the offensive line, and Sam Mustafa, through two good offensive line coaches, is developed and is holding them all off.
Hey, and guys, I see this sounds like a McCaskey meeting. The next, I am plenty critical of the Bears, and the Bears need to make major investments on this roster in the offseason. Center does not need to be one of those priorities. I mean, you need help at offensive tackle. You're going to need help at multiple defensive positions. You need probably two wide receivers. You need another tight end. Worrying about center when you have a league average center, and Sam Mustafa is probably about league average. I'm not saying he's great, but that is not where your priorities need to be. You have limited financial resources. Like this, I just don't get this one.
No, is that all anybody? I'm looking now. Is that all anybody wants to talk about, or we have anything else? I think
We
we've
did have
answered
some
that
other
one.
questions up top, and we do appreciate the comments and questions, guys.
Yeah, guys, listen, I hope everybody understands there's no right or wrong here. I'm not saying you're an idiot, it's just we don't agree, and the difference is that we are talking to coaches and players and evaluators, and that's not the way that Sam Mustipher is viewed around the National Football. Let me put it to you another way, okay? If the Bears did move on, Sam Mustipher would have a starting job somewhere else in the NFL almost immediately. That's how well he's developed over the last couple of years after being an undrafted rookie free agent. So, not dissing you for having the opinion, just trying to understand where it's coming from. That's all.
Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat now. It's getting weird. I got someone dropping in here saying they're Peter North, which is interesting. It's just things are getting odd. Sean, take us somewhere because
Let's
I'm
see.
completely
Was
off
there?
my game now.
I'm scrolling back up here. We had some other questions. Did we not?
Someone, CJ had another question about here. I'll throw this one up.
Oh
here.
yeah, I was just looking at that.
Well, and I was just looking at Ravi's questions because Ravi has an interesting string of things here about the quarterback development. But CJ is asking, along with Ravi's question, is there more talent on this team that Nagy isn't using properly? See Perryman overtime TD last week. CJ, it's possible, but Brashad Perryman is with his 8th team in 7 years in the league. So no, you cannot hang Brashad Perryman on Matt Nagy. Now, as we look around, this gets into the debate that I've been trying to engender all season long, which is for all of you who want the house cleaned, who want Pace and Nagy gone, there's a problem with that, which is that if Ryan Pace needs to go for not giving the Bears enough talent to win with, then you can't put it on Matt Nagy for not winning with it. And if Matt Nagy has to go because he's a terrible coach, it's because at some level you think he's had enough talent to win more than he has, and so you can't put it on Ryan Pace. And that's the problem with joining these guys at the hip. As I look at the Bears roster right now, players that I would like to have seen a bit more of, I don't know why Jesper Horsted can't be used in some way, because for 3 years now, every time he gets on the field, all he does is score a touchdown or make a play. I have felt that Alex Bars should have had a chance to compete at tackle even before they drafted Borum and Jenkins, although I like them a lot. I was a little disappointed to see Khalil Herbert relegated, Sean, I don't know if you'd agree, behind Damian Williams the other night, just because Damian Williams came, and nothing against Damian Williams, but his track record, 7 years in the league, can't stay on the field, will make some plays, doesn't make some plays. Khalil Herbert looks like he could be a starting running back somewhere. At wide receiver, they've just not had enough talent. I asked Ryan Pace the last time we talked to him, right after the final cuts, why wasn't Cordero Patterson brought back in free agency? And he said a luxury we couldn't afford. Now, I know 2020 hindsight is great, but that was too valuable a special teams contributor, if nothing else, to let go for the price tag. And look at what he's been now. But Matt Nagy tried to use him that way with some success at times, and so let's be fair about that. I think what happened, even though he's 32 years old, he's been around forever, is that Cordero just needed more regular time at running back because he's become a legit NFL running back right now. I look on the other side of the football. I thought Travis Gibson was going to be better by now than he is, and I don't know if that is because he hasn't gotten enough reps, but hey, until Khalil Mack got hurt, who are you going to sit down, Khalil Mack or Robert Quinn? And so that's a long-winded answer, Sean. I don't think so, but I think you can find examples on every team, of the guy who got away.
Yeah, I think Travis Gibson has had his chances. There were a couple games there where he was close to 73% of their snaps. It looks like the results just haven't really been there. He's had some really good moments, but just as far as consistently standing out, it hasn't really been there. And you're right, Hub. I just pulled up the snap counts this week. Damian Williams had 7 snaps to Khalil Herbert's 5 for the offense against the Packers. And yeah, you'd like to get Herbert involved a little bit more. I know David Montgomery is still going to be David Montgomery, but I don't know. At this point, I don't know why you wouldn't just give Khalil Herbert those second chances there when Montgomery's not on the field, or when you just want to change a pace.
And Kyle, before we move to the next question, I think to flip CJ's question around, what is the one thing that everybody raves about, with Ryan? Well, raves is a strong word, but everybody's very complimentary about with Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy. Look at what they get out of these day 3 draft choices. I mean, look at the players they have developed that other teams thought weren't even good enough to take, higher than the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So, no, I don't think player development has been an issue. It's certainly a good question, CJ, but I don't think that I'd have to say no. I don't think that's a problem. Got anybody else? I see you studying feverishly there, Kyle.
No, my connection dropped for a second.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Can I pull up this question from Timothy Wire?
Yeah.
Let's see here.
There you go, Hub.
Here we go, Hub.
I'm sorry, the puppy's chewing on me, guys. Timothy, how you doing, buddy? Why haven't they flexed Thomas Graham and Daz Newsome from the practice squad to see what the Bears have? When that happens, it's because what they're seeing in practice suggests to them that they don't have much. And I don't mean to be cruel there, but yeah, I mean, guys, the Daz Newsome pick interested me because everybody talked about the fact that as an underclassman, he had the 1,000-yard season, and he wasn't even the best receiver, on his North Carolina team. But the question is, why wasn't he the best receiver? And when we saw him in training camp, he just didn't stick out. I mean, you knew that he didn't have the kind of speed that you look for in receivers now. You hoped you had a possession guy, a guy who could stick in the slot. I'm not writing him off. He may have a future. But to me, when you look at how shaky this team has been at wide receiver, and shaky, I think, is complimentary. I don't think they're talented enough. It's the Riley Ridley story all over. We waited for Riley Ridley for a couple of years. He gets let go. He gets picked up. He doesn't do anything anywhere else. I just don't know. I mean, there's a lot of great football players who just aren't great enough for the NFL. Now, Thomas Graham was a different story, Sean, because let's not forget, he opted out last year in Oregon. And I mean, Eddie Goldman comes back. He's a 5-year pro, and it took him 8, 9, 10 games to get back to where he had the best game of his career against Pittsburgh. I think Thomas Graham is more of a developmental situation, and we may see him. That's a perfect example of a guy I'd like to see in the next 4 weeks. So that's a good name to bring up. I'm glad you did on that one.
Yeah, that's precisely why I wanted to bring that question up too. DeAndre Houston Carson is expected to be out for the year now with a forearm injury, and you would hope that this is maybe a chance for Thomas Graham to get pulled up from the practice squad. And certainly with all the COVID issues going on this week, we're going to most likely see a number of guys getting pulled up, and I would think that he's going to be one of them.
Yeah, and there was a question when Graham was drafted. He was a corner in college, but he looked to be a corner in a safety's body. And yes, you want these big corners, especially in the NFC North. But I don't know that he has the speed to match that body. And I kind of felt when they took him that he might be better at safety, which is obviously where DHC plays. So that's one to keep an eye on. That's part of this whole next 4 weeks that I'm looking forward to. I think we're going to learn a lot more about, what at least the future is, if not what the present might have been.
I do think there's a good chance we see Thomas Graham with the COVID issues, but talking about those COVID issues, I mean, Allen Robinson is currently on the COVID list. There is a chance we see Daz Newsome come up this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first choice has been Rodney Adams, although after that horrible drop he had 2 weeks ago, I don't know if that's going to stick. The next choice was Isaiah Coulter. He's also on the COVID list, so yeah, I mean, just play the numbers game. I'd say there is a good chance. There is a good chance that we're going to see Daz certainly before the season is out, if not Monday night.
Unless they also got Simba Webster, but he hasn't really been an offensive piece at all.
And he also is an NFL veteran who has done nothing anywhere he's been. So,
I'm going to throw this question up talking about Graham. I'm sorry if I mess up the name. I'm assuming, I don't know what this is Kawhi I'm going with here, but can Graham be worse than Vildor? Give guys a chance ever? I throw that up there because I actually want to talk about Vildor because he was a guy that I think all 3 of us were high on coming into the season. We liked what we saw out of him during during minicamp throughout the preseason. Felt like he got off to a good start and obviously has struggled over the last 6-8 weeks. Do you guys still think he has the potential to be a starter on this team?
Yeah, and Kawhi, forgive me, I'm just going to go for what I think is shorthand there, and certainly not making light of the handle at all. Vildor not only started fairly well, but was getting better. But by week 6, week 7, I was thinking the Bears may have their bookend corners for a while. And then I don't know exactly when it happened. I remember there was a game where he got burned a couple times, got a couple PIs. I got to go back and look at which game it was, but it was right about in the middle. It might have been the Pittsburgh game, although I think he started to struggle a little bit before then. And then, you talk to coaches about this. It's almost like his confidence just was gone. And when you're playing corner and you lose your confidence, it gets bad. So I saw enough the first half of the season that I would not quit on Kindle Vildor yet. But, Sean, the facts are the facts. I mean, he's on the bench now because of the struggles he's had the last 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, and that bad misplay in that Ravens game that really cost them that game, that was a mental error too. And so you wonder about the confidence issue when a couple of things go wrong. How much is he in his own head? Certainly they're not going to give up on him. They got him under contract for another couple of years on his rookie deal. We may wind up, again, with the COVID issues this week, we don't know how all this is going to shake out. With DHC going down with injury, we may see him on the field a little bit more. He has been out there for a handful of snaps the last few games, but it hasn't been to the level we saw earlier this season.
Yeah, they're definitely not quitting on him. And let's not forget that the secondary coach, Deshae Townsend, was a corner in the league for 11, 12 years. He knows how this works, and I'm sure that they're going to do everything they can to try and get him back to some regular playing time over these next 4 weeks, and they should, because
that's what I was just going to say. That they need to get him regular playing time over the next 4 weeks. As I was saying earlier about, you have limited resources. You need to know. I mean, cornerback obviously is an important position on this roster, and you need to know if you're going to need to invest considerable resources at that position in the offseason. So getting Vildor in there is important. I mean, you saw. They tried to bring in competition at the beginning of the year. I always mix up the true fonts, which one it was that was on the roster.
Desmond.
So, I mean, they felt the need to have a veteran. I expect if Vildor struggles, they're going to feel the need to bring in a veteran again this offseason.
Guys, I was just looking at this yesterday because and we're going to have to wrap it. We're getting long here. And because of the changes, just so everybody understands, Sean and I have been at Hallis Hall all year long, but one of the things the Bears have had to do now with this outbreak is we are back to 2020 protocols. Nobody in the building. And so we're going to be getting on Zoom. We are going to get to talk to the 3 coordinators, apparently, who are on the COVID list right now. And that's going to start for us in about 10, 15 minutes. So we're going to have to run here. But before we do, I'm sorry, and I lost my train of thought. We were talking just now, Kyle, about.
We're talking about Vildor, and if he struggles, potentially needing to bring in more veterans next year. And that's where I was going. Is I keep hearing people say, well, they got cap problems, they got to do this. No, they don't have cap problems. As a matter of fact, right now, if the cap goes to 208 million, which is where it was before COVID, and that's what they're trying to get back to. That's still just a projection. It could be lower, it could be higher. There is still some money that the owners are going to take back from the players, but let's say it's 208 million, which everybody's working with. The Bears are slated to have about $42 million in cap space, which is the 5th most in the NFL. And that would be, and that's because Allen Robinson's out of contract, Akeem Hicks is out of contract, but that would also be, people keep asking, well, what about Eddie Goldman and his contract, Danny Trevathan and his contract, even Nick Foles. There could be, there doesn't have to be, but there may be even more cap savings added. So, and they have a paucity of draft picks, unfortunately. That's the price of Justin Fields. They've only got, I think, 5 picks. I do want to have a caveat to this. They do have a lot of cap room, but they also have one of the lowest number of players under contract after the year. So they're going to have to fill out a lot on this roster.
But everybody does, Kyle. I mean, when you say the lowest number, I think they have 33. There's nobody with more than 38 or 40. So the difference is 5 or 6 players probably at the minimum. It's a good point. I'm not arguing the point.
They have okay cap. I do think they're probably if they want to be able to say we're going to be able to and here you wrote a column talking about, is this not a column, but you mentioned it, is this a rebuild or a reboot when if we do get a coaching change, and if they don't spend a lot in free agency, that probably means it's more of a rebuild. If they do, it's a reboot. And if you do plan on splurging in free agency, you probably are going to have to rework some contracts and make a couple tough roster decisions to fit in some impact players.
Well, so let's put a wrap on it here. Then let's look at it that way, because regardless of whether it's a rebuild or a reboot, here's what we know. We know that Justin Fields, David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, Darnell Mooney, Cole Kmet, the interior, the whole offensive line, basically, with the exception of Jermaine Ifedi and Jason Peters. And then on the other side of the ball, Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, Eddie Jackson, Jalen Johnson, and Robert Quinn. Those guys aren't going anywhere. Okay. And right there is the nucleus of a potential playoff team, depending on what you do with it. Okay. Now, I'm not predicting anything for next year, but I'm saying right there, it's not a rebuild. I mean, because a rebuild, you just wipe the slate clean, you get rid of high-priced players, and there's still enough dead money on the Mac and Quinn deals that you wouldn't do that. So, I just don't see how it's a rebuild. Now, it could be a 2 or 3 year reboot, where they wait to phase those guys out too, but I don't think that anybody, and especially ownership or management, wants that, Sean.
No, I don't think they want that either. You have this window with Justin Fields on his rookie contract that you have to take advantage of. They're probably not going to be competing for a playoff spot next year, but if you can make some of those the right moves and set yourself up to maybe compete the year after that, while he's still in the third year of his rookie contract, that's a really that's the ideal situation.
Kyle, they've done well on day 3, which is assuming that it's Ryan Pace, and my sources are telling me that Ryan's going to be here in one capacity or another. So they've got a few picks there, and then they clearly have to focus, I think, at wide receiver and cornerback. If they're serious about getting better quick, and if you make the right moves and splashes there, you're talking about something that the right coach can work with, whoever that may be.
I agree with you. I think they got to get better at tight end as well. I mean, I still like Cole Kmet, but with this offense, they probably need to get better at that. I guess we don't know what the offense is going to be probably. I think they can turn this around quickly. A lot of that depends on the GM making the right choices, and that's going to be hotly debated. If Ryan Pace, if he's here, if he's going to be able to do that or not. We don't have enough time to jump into that. We got a really important question that came in here from Kwai at the end. So I'm going to throw that up and answer that myself, which is, how can we subscribe to Shaw to read the daily, weekly articles? And you can do that by going to shawlocal.com. You do that in the top right corner, you'll find a subscribe button. Click on that. You'll see the deals. We have a holiday deal going on right now. I don't want to tell you what the price is because I don't honestly know offhand. We got deals going on pretty often and they change. But I do know we have a year-end deal happening right now. So again, shawlocal.com. You'll find a subscribe button in the top right corner.
Yeah, and and I hate to make this a commercial, but why not? I think what a lot of people don't realize when we talk about Shaw Media is that we are pretty much every small medium market paper in the northern half of the state that matters. We also have a content sharing partnership with the Daily Herald, and our readership is bigger than anybody in the state other than the Chicago Tribune, and we're gaining faster on them. And the talents on our staff, I'm just the old guy they're trying to phase out. I mean, it is some of the best reporting and reading you're going to get of any of your local news, as well as covering the state and the important national stuff. So I don't do this often, but I feel strongly about it. Knowing where the media business has gone and what the cost of these things are these days, we're the best bargain in town. So if you have not yet subscribed, please do, and do it now with the holiday special. Guys, real quick, Monday night, Bears Vikings. We assume the game will kick off on time. We're not sure yet if we'll be covering it from home or in the press box. We're waiting to hear more. I think we'll be in the press box. I'm pretty confident of that. I don't know if there'll be post-game interviews or not. And the Vikings come in very much in the playoff chase, needing to win this football game. Surprisingly, with one of the worst defenses in the NFL, but an offense that can score points fast and score them in bunches. So I don't know if you guys have made your predictions yet, but let's try and come up with something quick for our listeners. What do you think, Sean?
I have too many questions with the COVID issues, and we're going to have to see how that shakes out over the next couple of days. But at this point, I'm going to take the Vikings by 10.
Kyle?
Yeah, it's really hard to make a prediction in this game. One, because of the COVID issues. Two, because the Vikings just find a way to lose games, and they've actually done that against the Bears in recent years quite often, even when the Bears aren't very good. if the Bears were at full strength, I kind of would want to pick them here, but there's too many questions with them having a COVID outbreak. So yeah, I'm going to say that the Vikings win this game by about 10 points.
Yeah, guys, I was all set to take the Bears going into yesterday, going into Thursday. Not because I feel strong about them, but it was that spot. You knew they were due to get one again, and as mediocre as the Bears defense is right now, the Vikings defense is that much worse. Now the Vikings offense is obviously much better than the Bears. But it just felt like a good spot the way the Vikings tend to lose games. But looking at this COVID list and what's going on, it's impossible to say, hey, the Bears should win a football game. So my fear is that the Vikings get one, but we're recording Friday morning. We'll know a lot more on Monday. That's going to when you go to shawlocal.com. Our predictions will be in print then, and we'll be a little more informed. So I think what we just said is we're all feeling good about a better, more entertaining performance from the Bears again, but not necessarily a win. So we'll start with that and go into the weekend and hope that it gets better than that. Thank you all so much for being with us this week. Remember, if you're listening and didn't join us live, it's every Friday morning at 9:30. Go to @Kyle Nabors at Twitter. Go to @Sean_Hammond. Go to @Hub Arkush. That'll get you into the podcast live to join in the conversation. If you prefer not to, we appreciate you joining us however you choose, and we'll talk to you again next week right here.